Good to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. How's it been going your side? Good week?
Yes, good week, busy week. I think I should be happy that I'm busy. I think that's the takeaway. I read an article that apparently work from home increases your workday by 3 hours. So I'm wondering if everyone else is also getting hit with those 3 extra hours a day, either in the morning or the evening. But yeah, busy, which is positive, obviously. And there's been a slight change, I'd say, in the last couple of weeks. So that's good. How about your week?
Yeah, very similar. I think the days kind of seem shorter. You get to that point when it's like 3 or 4 o'clock, and you're like, "Where's the day gone?" But yeah, like I think, like you said, it's a good sign.
Yeah, it's positive. So I guess we should acknowledge the fact that there's some people out there watching us. So we're starting to see people coming in. So morning to everyone. Welcome to the Digital Growth Show. If this is the first time you've seen the show, where have you been? We were here last week. This is crazy. I can't believe you missed the first show. If you're watching the second show, that's great. Looks like we might be getting some fans, Amit, which is positive.
Yeah,
but obviously
I was going to say, it's always good when people tune in the second week, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's positive, and we know that of the timing of this means that some people as well missed last week and they watched it on the catch up. So I think the question, I've been watching a lot of webinars, and the question that get asked a lot is it going to be recorded? Can I see it another time? Yes, obviously. So we do share this afterwards, and it gets posted online as well. So we can, the resources that we can bounce through. But ultimately, we may play with the times in the next couple of weeks, perhaps shift the day, the timing as well to an afternoon, because we realise this may encroach on someone's kind of day. But yeah, good to have everyone watching and on board.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. So last week's show was really interesting. I think we got some really useful insights. So for those who didn't watch, we ran a number of sort of polls during the show. And I guess the one that took us possibly most by surprise was focused on marketing budgets. I think we all know that marketing budgets have suffered.
Yeah.
But I guess the extent to which they've suffered is what really kind of caught us by surprise.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we asked was, how has your marketing budget been affected, since kind of the outbreak of COVID? And it was 50%, I think just over 50% had said that their budgets have been cut by over half. And then a further 50% of those respondents said that their budgets have been cut by over 75%. And I think that was just huge, right?
Yeah, massive. Yeah. It's a huge impact, and we were good, obviously, 7-8 weeks into this. So I think at that point, most people have kind of had that impact. So there may have been some organisations, and I think we can dig into that. Some of the numbers we've got to show how there may have been a delayed impact for larger organisations, but still significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the challenge was people didn't know how long this was going to last. So obviously those could have skewed those numbers as well. But I felt that when we kind of reviewed this afterwards, that this was a topic that we just needed to explore much more, right?
Yeah.
And I think not just sort of explore it in terms of, okay, great, budgets are going to be cut, so what do we do? I think there's kind of a bigger impact, kind of more kind of far-reaching consequences of marketing budget cuts, not just for companies but also for employees, right?
Yeah.
And I think we should really kind of touch on that. So, when we kind of look at the impact of budget cuts, typically that means that, potentially there's less work that needs to be done, or vice versa. But the reality is that if your employer or your company is cutting marketing budgets, then, I think that raises a number of other questions, right? How much do they value marketing input? I think at a time when everyone kind of needs more business, to cut perhaps, the feeder to that new business, what does that kind of really say? And I guess, when we want to kind of look at things from a kind of employee perspective, I think a lot of this comes down to job security.
Yeah.
Right. does that mean that, the next thing to be cut is marketing professionals within an organization? I guess we don't know, but I think that's a concern. And I think, this is something that we need to look at, right?
Yeah, I think the wider impact as well within an organization perhaps may not be felt. Perhaps there are individuals within the organization that feel the marketing spend has no correlation to their activity, because they may be thinking, well, I don't really know what marketing does or what it really brings to the table. So I think not only in the marketing environment, but sales is impact, ownership across the board. So yeah, I think that security of individuals is something that needs to be looked at. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think I think on that note, let's kind of ask our kind of audience here, and let's see what they, what they're kind of feeling right now.
Yeah.
So again, guys, if you didn't really tune in last week or you didn't see the show, we tried to make this as kind of interactive and engaging as possible in terms of asking your opinion, asking for your contributions.
Yeah.
So I'm going to launch a first poll, which is basically doing exactly this. And the question is really about your kind of job security. So, whether you're a marketer or whether you're not, how concerned are you about your kind of future prospects with your current employer? And if we can start to, brilliant, we're starting to see some of the answers coming in. So we'll keep that running for another sort of 10 seconds or so. So if you haven't answered, please do.
Yeah. Yeah, and as Amit mentioned, there's a couple of things that we're going to run through every week, and we use these polls not only to get your feedback and really kind of understand who's there, because ultimately this show is for you guys, but also we use these polls to determine what we're going to talk about the next week as well. So we want to make sure that what we're talking about is relevant and in the now, as opposed to building out an agenda for the next 10 weeks. Which may not be relevant to the circumstance.
Yeah, so I've got the answers on the screen now, and I'd say aside from 27% of you who are not concerned, great. I mean, you guys I think are lucky ones at the moment. So we're nearly 75% of people saying that they're either slightly concerned, very concerned, or they've already been let go. I think this kind of tells us a lot, and I feel as if it's important that we kind of address that, Andrew. So what is it that employees can do? Because again, marketing budgets have cut, but I feel as if there's a lot that marketing can still do as a contribution to the company's kind of future success, right? Irrespective of whether there's kind of large budgets or not. It might mean working harder. It might mean working smarter. But I think first and foremost,
learning new skills. Yeah.
Right. And first and foremost, I think it's important for employees to be able to stand out and give themselves an opportunity of, being able to contribute, because, I think that the scary sort of, consequence of all of this is, marketing is the next person to be let go, and I feel as if, there's things that employees can do that really kind of make themselves sort of stand out. So, I mean, kind of any kind of thoughts on that perspective, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that this is the time to almost reevaluate your own position within the organisation and the contribution that you obviously put forward. So I think obviously this is dependent on the organisation that you're within. So I think what we're seeing a bit more fluidity as far as organisations allowing employees to essentially start to contribute more. So I think obviously everyone, or majority lion's share of people working from home, so they do have an opportunity potentially to focus their energies and their efforts on other activities that ultimately contribute to the overall success of the individual and ultimately the organization. I mean, interestingly enough, if you look at some of the large tech companies like Google and kind of Twitter, Facebook, they for years have been allowing their employees to focus a day or half a day on some of their own activity, something that is they're passionate about, or something somewhere else where they can feel they can add value. So I find it quite interesting that obviously has been happening up to this point, but this is a real chance for ultimately employees to retrain themselves or rehome their skills, or potentially even kind of bring some other ideas and thoughts to the table within organizations. Obviously this is possible. So I think this is a real chance for individuals to kind of put it on themselves to say, okay, right, I know that marketing budgets have been cut. I know obviously we're in this current situation. What can I do? How can I, improve my reach? How can I improve my knowledge to essentially make suggestions and put ideas forward? Because I think the thing is with this, okay, necessarily they may not be actioned, but at least, from an employment standpoint, you're seen to be adding further value to your already kind of valuable core. I mean, what do you think?
No, I agree with you. I think there's a couple of problems here, though. And the first is remote working, right? So many of us are still, not in the office. We're not visible to potentially employers. And there's a real danger of kind of being, out of sight, out of mind, right? With all of this that's going on, especially if there is no kind of marketing budget out there. I completely agree with you in terms of, learning new skills, how, making yourselves kind of stand out. But I think there's other things that we can kind of recommend as well. And I think let's look at this from a kind of employer perspective. So we've got a team of people that are in the same situation, right? They're sitting at home, they're working. And we always, I guess, see a trend of, the people with more kind of, extrovert personalities, the guys who are kind of very comfortable jumping in front of a screen, who are quite vocal in the office. I think they kind of remain so, in their kind of remote environment.
Yeah, in a remote environment, yeah.
Right. But we know that a number of our kind of stars are those who are very quiet, right? They just diligently get on with their work. And I think it's kind of been able to kind of recognize that, especially when companies are having to make really kind of important decisions right now.
Yeah.
So, I guess there's a couple of kind of tips, but I guess the most important one from my perspective is I just feel as if employees need to really kind of stand up, try and be innovative, try and be kind of helpful, and come up with ideas, right? And not just kind of ideas for the sake of ideas, but ones that they've kind of thought through. And even if these don't get implemented by the employer or by the company, employees remember that. Right, this is someone who's actively trying to help us to save a business, grow the business, whatever that looks like. But that's kind of what we do, right? We want to know, which team members are rolling their sleeves up, which ones are kind of ready for a fight, which ones really kind of passionately care about what they do and who they do it for.
Yeah.
And I think, standing up and, trying to be counted, trying to contribute is absolutely one sort of critical thing. The second thing is, I think, to tell employees is be brave. I think there's a tendency, and especially in the regions that we operate in, where people play it safe rather than brave.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so what do you think about that?
This is a time to be brave, really. I mean, I think if we just go back to the poll, just a few minutes ago, where obviously 75% are slightly concerned or already been adversely affected and currently are not obviously working. There's no better time to be brave in this sense. So this isn't a time to be shrinking in the background or becoming part of the background on furniture. This is the time to kind of want to shine. And perhaps highlight some of the things that you want to focus on. I think the thing is that, this isn't about bragging. This isn't about kind of waving the flag a bit too hard. It's just about increasing that confidence and making suggestions. It may be, for example, I mean, we have a pretty, I'd say, solid communicative environment at Nexa. So we have the daily meetings. We have top and tail meetings at the end of the week with the whole team. We're constantly on video with each other, and we have an always-on video policy in our company as well. But if that isn't in your company, perhaps it's getting groups of your individuals in your department together. Perhaps kind of even doing something like by the water cooler. We obviously edit. So I think the thing is that it's looking at other initiatives as well that you can potentially do for yourself, and then ultimately how that can be realized in the environment you're in as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're really not sure where to get started, speak to your employers.
Yeah.
Right. Ask where they need help. It might mean that you have to do things that you don't typically do.
Yes.
But again, if you're seen as contributing, I think it can help. But I think,
yeah, I mean, even if you're an environment that frankly, it's difficult to work, put your hand up and say, listen, guys, I need to help. What can I do? Because trust us. At the moment, everyone needs help. Okay, within an organization, everyone does. So nobody has all of the answers. So to have additional, even somebody putting a hand up and saying, hey, listen, I've got some free time. This task that I usually do, I can't currently do, for example, because bear in mind, employers may be blissfully unaware, right? As far as some of the impacts of obviously reduced marketing budgets and these. I'm not saying that all of them are, but some of them will be. So I think putting your hand up and saying, hey, listen, I can help. What can I do? How can I, just getting out there and being brave, like you mentioned, that.
Yeah. No, I agree. Awesome. So I hope that's kind of helped some of you out there, to really kind of, start to focus on some of the things that you can do. Andrew, shall we kind of dig into the data a little bit? Because I think, I think what we've seen is really interesting.
Exactly. Just before we kind of move on to the data, what I would say is that we're going to kind of put a resource link after this as well. So when we send out the mail, we'll put a couple of resources to some other areas as well that potentially as an employee you can look at kind of those first bold steps and being brave, obviously, because I think that's something that we could talk about for the next hour and a half, right? But obviously we're trying to keep these fairly tight. So just to remind everyone before we kind of jump into these numbers, because I'm pretty buzzed about getting into this.
Yeah, awesome. So let me load up the first set of numbers, and it really kind of I'd say almost confirms what we heard last week and what we've been kind of seeing around us. So let me just load that up. And this was connected to ad budget, and I think this was really interesting. So just before I kind of move on, these numbers and all this data has been provided to us by HubSpot. And HubSpot have created over the last couple of months a really kind of useful information resource where they've collated data and insights from about 70,000 customers globally. And so there's a lot of data and a lot of kind of really kind of useful information that we've got access to. And it's really kind of helping us to kind of understand not only what's going on around us in the regions that we operate, but what's going on elsewhere, right? Are there kind of, trends that we can kind of pick up on? Are there, countries or regions that have sort of coped with this better and they're, they're in a seemingly different place to the rest of us? So, and again, I think in our kind of resource notes, we could share the link to some of this data as well. But what we'll do is we'll kind of run through a couple of the important things here, Andrew. And I think we'll just kind of duck in and out of the data itself. Yep.
Yeah, because I think one of the things we mentioned as well, the first week preloading, which isn't death by PowerPoint. So we're not slide-tastic. We're not going to be, and obviously, I mean, we're starting to build a fan base, and they want to see our face, right? So yeah, we're duck in and out of the slides.
Honestly, Andrew, I think we're all tuning in to see how long your beard gets, but that's another topic.
Yeah, it's used as a yardstick now, right? I've got a beard, but I haven't got an Andrew beard.
Yeah. I've heard that from people, and it's scary every time that happens. That you're now the global benchmark for beard length. We're in a scary world. Anyway, so
perhaps we should do a chart on my beard length. But anyway, back to Anspin.
Yeah, I think if we look at sort of March 30th is probably the peak of your beard. I think if we look at it from that perspective. Well, anyway, so what this data tells us here is that from January, so HubSpot decided to look at this data kind of pre and post COVID, and they wanted to kind of look at maybe January as that kind of benchmark. And then what we were seeing was quite a nice trend up until sort of the middle of Feb, where ad budgets were sort of increasing. And then obviously everything sort of fell off a cliff in March in terms of expenditure. And I think what's interesting here is, like I said, if we look at the 30th of March, that week is really where things were perhaps at their worst in terms of ad spend. Perhaps sort of immediate cuts were put in. But what we're seeing now over time is a slight sort of upward trend where there seems to be more people spending money, and it'll be interesting, I think, to keep an eye on that. I mean, this was just good to see from a confirmation perspective, Andrew, but I think what kind of interested me the most is this slide. So, and the one after, which I'll go into as well. But this was just a bit more of a confirmation in terms of which industries have been affected. And obviously we've got this sort of pink line here, which is travel, and then the grey line, which is entertainment. And we all know that, right? So I'll move kind of quickly on from there. This was the one I think that surprised me, and it'll be interesting to get your take on this as well, Andrew. So, when we look at sort of, recessions, when we look at, any kind of business crisis, we almost feel as if, the bigger companies, the ones with bigger sort of cash buffers and reserves, these are the ones that, really kind of dominate these times because, they've potentially got more money to spend. They've got the kind of reserves that SMEs don't have at all. And I think it was really interesting because I think a lot of us just anticipated that actually maybe it's for bigger companies that won't be affected. They've got budgets that were set out for 2020, and why would that change, right? And I think what we saw here was something quite interesting in the sense of this bottom key here is the company size. And initially, while essentially the rest of the world was kind of panicking, and we're hitting kind of middle of March here, so SMEs were affected, and then we started to see a bigger impact, in terms of SME spend. What we kind of see in the background is that larger companies now, and granted, 200 people isn't a large company, but I know HubSpot within their data set do have large companies. But it's interesting to see how they've almost reacted late, right? But their impact is potentially more damaging to economies and to marketing companies, I guess, and publishers than some of the SME impact. I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think obviously, do you want to pull away the slide, Emmett, or do you want to keep the slides up? Just concerned. So yeah, I think what's interesting about this is this potentially almost falls in line with some of the job cuts that we're starting to see, and we're starting to emerge for some of the larger organizations where, because people were unaware of how long this would last, perhaps the larger organizations did have the capability to have some cash reserves and obviously look at continuing to spend, obviously, and look. But now we're reaching that point where large organizations are looking to drastically cut costs, and they're looking to make sure that they can survive. So be through losing staff, obviously, or letting people go, but obviously ultimately the impact on ad spend as well. And if you look at that as well, I think that it may just be the organizational size. So as we mentioned, obviously it's 200 plus, which isn't particularly a large organization, but it still means when you've got that kind of 200 employee mark, it's difficult sometimes to navigate. So whereas the SMEs were able to pivot, so it may be looking at a entirely different service line or product line. It may be moving all of your business online. In a smaller organizations, usually, they're more nimble. They can reallocate budgets. So there's not, 15 signatures and a committee and if we need to reallocate budget, for example, some of these decisions can be made a bit faster. So I think that, now you're starting to see that ad spend on here is effectively, it's like a second wave. So the first wave, as we saw, was, people that were immediately affected. Okay, we've got to cut ad spend because we don't know how long this is going to go on, and we don't have a cash burn. And now you're starting to see those larger organizations be impacted by this as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, my concern is how the second wave, how damaging is that going to be?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Because, I guess, there's a number of different points here, but the first is it feels like, that kind of delayed responses because of some of the red tape and things like that you mentioned. But have these large companies completely underestimated the impact of COVID on their businesses? Right? Does that mean that they're now in panic mode and perhaps they're even cutting more than they perhaps should? Right? And then the knock-on effect of that on publishers and marketing agencies and everyone who's kind of impacted by this. I feel as if that's really, potentially dangerous. I think it's something we need to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see that in the next few months. I think, you know, what obviously we're going to be referencing this data on a weekly basis. So I think the thing is we're going to start to see, you know, perhaps in a month's time, see where we are then as far as has the impact been felt. So we asked this obviously last week as far as marketing spend and marketing budget. You know, perhaps when we ask this in a month's time, the question may be answered very differently. So you may kind of see, you know, the whole people that are watching, obviously, that say, no, yeah, look, 100% it's been cut. You know, that's it.
Yeah, no, interesting. So let's look at some of the things that people can do, because, you know, when we look at sort of budget cuts, especially related to marketing, I think, Andrew, we've kind of been through, you know, the 2008 and 09 recession, and again, similar things happened at that point. So as marketers, we preach to the world that this isn't an opportunity to really cut marketing. What you should be doing is doubling down on marketing. You know, this is an opportunity to kind of increase market share, you know, especially if your competitors have stopped spending. But the reality is that if people haven't got money to spend, they haven't got money to spend, right? So, you know, where can people actually have an impact still from a marketing perspective, right? And I think what HubSpot have done is they've provided some really interesting data and insights, again, that kind of guide people. So I'll just pull up the next set of data. Second. And this one I think is pretty close to our heart in terms of, you know, sales emails. So HubSpot have a way of kind of differentiating and defining sales emails versus marketing emails. And they define kind of sales emails as both kind of cold or coldish emails, you know, that you're kind of sending to an audience, you're trying to tell them what you do. And then the kind of main objective of these sales emails is really to trigger a response back, right? So that, you know, your sales team now have something that they can work with and communicate with. This data is really interesting. I think if you look at it in terms of, you know, sales emails, I guess looks like they were potentially kind of on the decline. And then obviously I think as a consequence of even marketing budgets being cut, there's been a huge increase in the amount of, you know, sales emails that have been sent out, right? I mean, if you look at that data, it's you know, I'm kind of amazed by it, especially when we're talking about, you know, upwards of sort of 75% of an increase. But a bit I'm kind of fascinated in, and again, Andrew, it'd be good to get your insights on this, is that purple line is showing that the number of responses are declining, right? So, you know, as a percentage of emails sent, you know, what does that tell us? What does that show? And what do people need to do to be kind of smarter and get around this? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're obviously, so, I mean, stats don't lie, data doesn't lie. So as much as we may be, you know, sales teams may be encouraged to perhaps double down their efforts. So reach out to your customers, reach out to your prospects, you know, cold, warm, whatever, you know, get the messaging out there. We're seeing that the open rates here are obviously, or the response rates are, sorry, I shouldn't say open rates, I should say the response rates are lower. Now, obviously, we understand that at the moment, there may just be a lack of funds, so people may not necessarily be able to respond positively, so they would rather not respond than saying, listen, you know, no, I don't have any budget, I don't have this, I don't have that. Open the window, open the door, look outside, you can see what's going on. So there may be a consequence of that. I think that also if these sales emails are not, you know, thought about as far as how you're communicating with that potential prospect, I think that has a kind of challenge associated to it as well. So for example, what we've started to do is we've ramped up all of our video activity. So when we are communicating out there, and we've communicated, obviously certain sales emails still have to go out. We haven't necessarily increased, but what we have is we've changed the type of communication. So we've tried to make it more personable. We've had a video. We're using Vidyard, which is a company that allows you to record video, embed it in an email. And I'd say that I'm seeing, and so the rest of the team is seeing, a better response rate. We're seeing that across for clients as well. That, I mean, everyone I'm encouraging to use video to communicate to prospects. So I think, you know, yes, there is a decline in the response. Okay, how can we combat that? I think one of the areas that we can combat is be relevant, not blanket as far as our approach, and then also add a personal touch to that communication by way of a video.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Video is powerful, but I think very sort of underutilized in the email world. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And then, look, it may be, I think the thing is as well that we have to realize that just the sheer scale of emails that are coming through as well. So probably everyone's inbox now has 1,500 webinars. So really appreciate you guys watching ours. But in addition to more information, more blogs, so that may be one of the reasons as well.
Sure. So let's kind of look at this from a marketing email perspective, because I think we're seeing a very, very different story here. And so again, let me kind of define how what HubSpot kind of classes marketing emails.
Yeah.
And these are kind of emails that are going out to people that potentially already know you. So it might have been a current prospect, it might be a previous prospect, it might be a customer. And what you're trying to do here is kind of drive more education, perhaps more nurturing. You want to kind of introduce them to new products and services, whatever that kind of looks like. And the difference is kind of staggering. I think, firstly, there seems to be less people, as a percentage compared to sales marketing emails, less people seem to be sending less marketing emails. The increase in sales emails were, upwards of nearly 75%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Here we're seeing something closer to around a 30% increase. And I think it's really interesting because, the open rates are substantially different. And so, and I guess that comes down to people having maybe perhaps a little bit more time. Yes, they're getting more emails and they seem busy, but they're at home. They're not, they're not on the road. They can kind of spend, 10 seconds reading a quick email. And I think people are perhaps more interested in kind of educating themselves further and kind of learning more as well. So, I think if your email has the right kind of content, I think that adds kind of, really kind of strong value. But Andrew, let's share with everyone what we've been doing. I think because, we've seen something very similar, I guess, right?
Yeah, just before we dive into what we've been doing, I think the other thing is, as you mentioned, that also where people are opening emails. So because we're working from home, we're spending more time on our desktop, on our desk, as opposed to potentially, I don't know how many other people kind of pick up their mobile at a set of traffic lights and kind of open their inbox and see and glance and skim, versus obviously spending the time to read and also just research more as well. So I think that also has an impact on the open rate. It has an impact on what people are doing with those emails. So you're seeing, that there's an open rate and there's an action on the back of it because people have time. Like you mentioned, they have time to do a bit more research. They have time to kind of look, and that may be just down to time in the sense of, lack of office distraction. I think, there's definitely, when obviously people are walking around or talking or you're getting up making coffee, and as we said, more people are spending 3 hours on average more in the day. Yeah. So sorry, back to kind of what we're doing from a content perspective and what we're doing. So I think the thing is that, our kind of activity from the marketing spend has been, from a marketing perspective and emails, has been really focused around content and, generating content, right? I think we're using obviously email, we're using our website, we're using our social channels to effectively distribute content that we're producing, either through written content or video content, essentially around similar scenarios like this, real world advice, things that you can do, practical activity, really just out there to help. Yeah. So I think we took a conscious decision on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of it. So, especially if you're engaging in kind of an audience that already knows about you, it's how you can add value to what they're doing right now, what they're going through. And I think, we've definitely done that. I think one area to also kind of talk about is this webinar, right? So this kind of growth show that we put together. We've spent no money on this aside from a Zoom license, right? In terms of any advertising, we've not decided to grow the audience. What we've decided to do is leverage our existing audience, and we've got a database of customers and clients, prospects, former prospects that perhaps didn't convert. And all we've done is we've told them about the show. We've obviously sent some emails, marketing emails based around that, telling them what they should expect within the show. And I think what's surprising is well, we've had really good registration numbers, in the hundreds for both weeks. But actually, through those emails, we're seeing a number of these people seemingly forwarding those emails onto friends, colleagues, people who they feel this might be of interest to. And 30% of the people that we're seeing registered for these events are actually people we've never even come across, right?
They're
not on our radar. They're not on our database. And we've done a couple of LinkedIn posts again, but we've not spent any money on this. So I think it is really kind of looking at what data you have, having a tool to basically, be able to dissect that data. We use obviously HubSpot for that, but it would be really useful, I think, for people to kind of really look at that and saying, okay, where can we add value and on what channel? So I think that's quite interesting in terms of an approach. The other area, and Andrew, you touched on this, so which is why I want to kind of go into it. Website traffic. So again, we're all at home. We're remote working. We're in front of our laptops pretty much all day rather than mobile phones, which might be the case for people that are kind of out and about all the time. But website traffic has increased, and you can see a very sort of clear trend from sort of mid-February upwards. Where essentially people are getting more visits to their website, and I guess it comes down to what they do about traffic, right? So. Again, Andrew, what do you kind of think here?
I mean, I wouldn't mind just throwing it back to you, mate. Let's talk about our traffic, right? So, sure. At the moment, do you want to share with everyone kind of how our traffic has changed?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. Look, we're kind of numbers people, so we kind of obsessively look at this. So if the difference in traffic between February and April was about 90%. So we had a 90% increase in traffic between those months. And again, that's without spending money. We're not huge spenders on advertising anyway, rightly or wrongly. We've got such a strong sort of organic base. We're pretty visible. So we didn't suddenly start spending more money on sort of driving people back to the website. But what worked for us was content. So we've always created, I'd say good quality content, and maybe not in the right volume. But what we did do in February, March, and April was create kind of more volumes or greater volumes of higher quality content. And that content has really had an impact, especially where we've sort of collaborated with people in the UK and people in the US again, to produce these things. So it's been good for us. But just one more thing, sorry, mate. Is what I'm not saying, and it's important to know this, is because we've had almost double the amount of people coming onto our website, we've had double the amount of leads that have come through, right? Because that hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened, and I'm perfectly fine with it because I think you mentioned earlier, people possibly haven't got the money to spend right now. But the fact that they're still conducting research, reading our content, and doing it in our environment, which is our website, I'm more than happy with that, right? So even if we had the same amount of leads, I'd be okay with it, right? Because I think as things kind of improve and develop, we've played a part in the education of that person. And that stands us, I think, in much sort of stronger stead moving forward. We should have built some trust and credibility with people on the back of our efforts.
Yeah, I think we've worked hard as well to generate content that isn't generic. And by that, I mean, there's some incredible content out there that people are putting forward as far as, how to, build a better website, how to improve your social presence, all of these, there's some phenomenal content creators that are producing good quality content. What we decided is go about it a bit differently as far as the type of advice and the type of content that we wanted to create and also populate and push out there. Back to this digital growth show that we're doing, this was very much on the back of, okay, well, let's do something in the now, let's add value. And again, we've obviously been honestly, genuinely surprised and and kind of humbled by the response just on 2 weeks. As Amit said, registrations in the hundreds, and because we're super analytical guys as well. I think Amit would probably say he's a bit more obsessed with this. He went back afterwards to see how long all of you actually watched, the webinar for last time. And he's like, okay, this person watched it for 31 minutes. This person watched it for 28. So, we kind of took a deep dive on that as well. But I think the thing is, obviously, from a content perspective, I, even in the last week, spoke to three individuals, and I said to them, listen, get out there, get on LinkedIn, start creating content. I know one person that went out and bought an O-ring and a clicker so they can kind of film themselves on LinkedIn, because again, no marketing budget, limited resources, limited team, but they need to, so how do you get out there? You start producing content, and obviously, this may not have, as Amit mentioned, an immediate click or an immediate response as far as you suddenly see a hockey stick on your sales, but what it does do is it starts to help with the pipeline. It starts to help to have conversations. And as you said, Amit, this is 2 weeks in a row now that this audience that we're talking to, actually, Amit and I don't know you, or we may know you, but you're not popped up on the Nexa radar, right?
Sure. Yeah. And I think, look, just to go back to the original point of this, which is how do we help marketers or marketing professionals to kind of implement things like this? This is where you can really engage your entire company. So, we understand that, the content we create ourselves. So things like blog articles, they're difficult to write because they take time. But what we did do is we recruited the help of every single person in our company, and we opened it up and said, look, guys, look, we understand some of you might not be comfortable with writing, but write about something that you see around you, something that you're passionate about. If it's related to the industry, even better. But what we will do is we will edit each article that comes in before it goes live, and we'll make sure that it's of the right kind of standard, but we'll give you absolute full credit for it. And that's had a really good impact, because it's just meant that we've been able to produce the right kind of volumes. That has been a kind of vetting process. And we've actually got some really good content that we're using in sort of multiple ways. So I think just as an extra kind of tip, try and do that, engage a company. If anyone wants, some actual insights and data to back this up, I'm more than happy to share that with you as well. So, get in touch and just let us know, what you need, or if you'd like to build a case internally, and we can sort of help you present that and give you some solutions for that, just so that you can speak to your bosses about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have this slide ready, but I mean, one thing to say is that we looked at this a few weeks ago, that not only is web traffic up, but time spent on the web has increased as well. So people are actually, looking at this content, reading this content, watching this content, and spending overall more time on our site. So it's not just people kind of bouncing in and bouncing out. We've actually got, individuals and people that are coming in, traffic to the site that is qualified and is spending time actually reading this content that's being produced.
Yeah, no, agree. So look, I think but there's a little bit more data I want to go into, but before I do that, because it's very kind of related to this, I'm going to launch another poll, because it'd be really kind of good to understand really the impact on everyone's business over the last 3 months, or the last 2 months, and then the next month moving forward. So there's 2 questions here. So if you could answer both, that'd be great. So the first question is focused on what changes in demand have you noticed in the last month compared to the previous month? So really we're talking about sort of March versus sort of April. And then the second part of this is, what are you anticipating for the next month moving forward? So say 4 weeks from now. Okay,
we're asking people to work for this now, right? So we're kind of this isn't gated content, it's not chargeable, but what we do like is we like a bit of audience participation. So yeah, as we mentioned, these polls really help us understand the situation now, and then potentially what we can talk about and add value to you guys, for the future weeks.
Yeah, so just wait for the last couple more to come in, and then we'll stop the poll. Okay, so really interesting. So let me share the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so really interesting. So people are seeing it's a real mix actually, which is actually quite good. Yeah, I mean, look, I think different. I guess a lot of this comes down to different industries.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for those who are saying that they're going to see a substantial increase, that's brilliant. And if we look if we look at the next sort of month ahead, again, I think it's split down the middle. So reduced demand and increase in demand. So the reason I wanted to kind of ask this is basically just for almost like the last set of data that we've got. And this is very much kind of focused on hopefully sharing some sort of, or shedding some light at the end of this tunnel that we're all in at the moment. And if we look at this data, which is basically about the deals that are created and the deals that have been closed, again, this is across 70,000 customers of HubSpot. And obviously HubSpot as a CRM contains a lot of this data, right? In terms of how many new deals or opportunities have been created. And what they're able to track is how many deals are actually closing. And I guess, a lot of this kind of rings maybe very true to a lot of people where, last week of March, first week of April, perhaps was where, there just wasn't many deals closing. There wasn't many deals being created, but I think what we've seen in April is we're slowly starting to kind of head in the right direction. I think for any business or any industry, if you're suddenly, creating 30% less deals or closing even 35% less, I mean, it has a massive knock-on impact, right, and effect on the business. But the fact that if we look at even the last week, we've kind of gone from that low of 30% to maybe just over 10% in terms of deals created, which is great. And in terms of closed deals, we're seeing some some correlation with that as well. And I think that's kind of really important, because I think it does show us that potentially, we're going to hopefully get to a point of equilibrium in terms of where we were, where things are perhaps maybe not quite where they were, but close enough where we can all kind of survive and look forward.
I mean, I think we're obviously industries that are still able to operate, as we saw obviously previously, like travel and entertainment is still a challenge, but for industries that need to continue to operate, we definitely kind of, there's a shift, and I think I sensed that last couple of weeks as well. I mean, I think we spoke about this, where it's kind of, well, actually we need to continue, because otherwise there's going to be even more serious consequences, right?
Yeah, of course. I think yeah, and again, it's difficult to measure what those consequences are, but I think the reality is that we're very much dependent on something that we can't control, which is obviously the virus. But I think, with the kind of measures that people are taking, hopefully things can return a little bit more back to normal. We know things like travel and entertainment have been sort of hugely impacted, but if we start to see those kind of businesses opening, that has an enormous impact from a kind of social perspective, maybe a kind of, population morale perspective, and people may start actually spending money that they're not spending right now as well, right? Which kind of, again, impacts everybody.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Just this last bit of data here, I felt it was important just to kind of throw in some regional context with this. So it's the same data. So we're still looking at kind of deals created as opposed to deals closed. But I think what we're seeing is, that, again, in the regions that we operate, we're still seeing that same trend, right? So, for example, in Europe and the Middle East, we're seeing, kind of like an upward trend in North America, and, and for all of the, Trump's criticism, the fact that he's possibly opening things up faster than, perhaps they should, North America's had, quite a big revival in terms of, deals that are now closing again. Yeah. So I think that's kind of really important to address. And I think there's, businesses are really wanting to get back to normal as quick as possible. Yeah. And there's obviously kind of challenges and risks associated to that. But, hopefully, that last bit of data shows that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully we are past the worst of it. And as long as we can kind of, do the right things, things should get better.
Spike Lee there. Well done. Right there, yeah. No, I agree. I think it's. I think we obviously we're continuing to remain positive. We're trying to add value. We're trying to help where we can, and obviously, hopefully we will start to see this continued activity. I think the thing I would say, if we go back to right at the beginning where we said, "How has your week been?" Frankly, honestly speaking, I think myself and Amit and the rest of the team, it's the busiest we've been. So, be it kind of potential prospect calls or engaging with existing customers to understand how we can help them and kind of move them forward and move them out of the current scenario. However that kind of slices and dices, the whole team is busy, which is obviously positive. And also just conversations that I have and obviously the rest of the team have. Other organizations are busy, other organizations, even there's some organizations that have started going back to the office, starting to see that increase as well. So hopefully we start to see, as we said, we're going to continue to look at this data and we start to see a positive trend in deals created and then ultimately closed as well.
Yeah. So look, I think just to kind of finish off, there's one question that we need to ask you guys, and it's important because this show is really about helping people as much as we can, right? So we know that, hopefully we're seeing now that, businesses can think about growth, even if it's growth from March as opposed to growth from 2019. But, for us to be able to kind of help you guys, it'll be really important for us to kind of understand what help you're looking for. So I'm just going to throw the last kind of poll up there. And this poll is just very much so that we can, we can sort of tailor the content that we share in the next few episodes based on what you guys are really kind of interested in learning more about. So
I can't believe you didn't put grooming tips on there. That's surely that should be. We could do that as well.
Grooming that, I'm not sure we're in the best place to answer that. You perhaps, mate. I think your hipster style is coming through. All right. Cool. Brilliant, guys. Yeah, so just a note on this, you can pick as many as you want here. So if there's multiple topics that you're interested in, go ahead and just select as many of those as you like.
Service measurement, do you want to explain what service measurement is, Amit?
Sure. So yeah, service measurement, it's an area which is very much geared towards growth. And really what we're trying to understand is how satisfied your customers are. So whether you're B2B or B2C. How satisfied are they with what you do and what you provide, measuring that, and then coming up with strategies to allow you to kind of, build more loyalty, retain customers, how to engage them more, how to turn them into kind of brand ambassadors. So that's really what we're talking about from a kind of service measurement perspective.
That's nice. So just somebody just mentioned here that someone has picked all of them. So that's quite cool. Someone's just saying, if we thought the grooming tips would have had an impact on Andrew, it may be worthwhile. It's highly unlikely.
I'll tell you what.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Maybe that's whoever that was. Thank you so much, because I've tried in vain over the last 2 to 3 years to politely tell Andrew about the length of his beard and the impact it has. Actually, it would be interesting to see what correlation there is between the length of your business and our kind of sales performance. So maybe I'll dig into those numbers for next time.
Don't. That's too scary. Those numbers are too scary. Actually, I mean that's pretty good then. So we've got 68% on marketing insights. So topping out is business growth strategy and marketing, right? So, but I mean, all closely followed. Brilliant. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Look, really appreciate the input there. So we'll use this data to really kind of make sure that we give you the kind of content that you want. Yeah. And the kind of content that we can help. But I think from our side, it's nearly been an hour. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Next week's show, there might be a slight kind of update in terms of the timings and the day, but we'll let you know about that. But nonetheless, it will be next week. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm Amit.
Yep, and I'm Andrew. Thank you very much for watching. We look forward to seeing everyone next week. See you then. Bye.
Take care, guys.